Thank you guys for joining in to Living Life Holistically with Dr. Erica Steele. I am Dr. Erica Steele, and I'm a holistic doctor in family practice. I hold 6 degrees in my field, and they're all in the natural healthcare space, ranging from psychology to natural healthcare sciences. You guys can all look it up. I am a drugless doctor. Today, we are talking with one of my dear patients, and I would consider a friend, Lisa Armstrong, and she is going to talk about her journey in her health. And we are so excited to have her in today. Before I bring her on, I would like to introduce you to her so that you know who is Lisa Armstrong. Lisa considers herself as a multidimensional being. She is strong, resilient, and purpose-driven. And those are just a few of the attributes that describe her. She's also a wife to Todd Armstrong Sr. and a mother of 2, Tatiana and Todd Jr. She received her associate's degree of theology from Christian World College of Theology in Salisbury, Maryland, and also received her bachelor's degree in human resource management at the University of Maryland University College in May of 2020. In the business arena, she is a senior supervisor at a Fortune 500 utility company for the last 18 plus years, the CEO of LDA Collections International, and is an esteemed author of 2 books, Self-Care is Good, but Soul Care is Best, and The Cape That Almost Destroyed Me. Those are just some of the snippets of who she is, and she is grateful for the opportunity to share on this platform, but I'll let her say that. What's molded her as a conqueror, overcomer, and survivor are now words that attach. So please welcome to the show, Lisa Armstrong.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well, bright and early on this Saturday. It's
Yes,
good.
ma'am.
Yes,
It's good.
definitely.
Yes.
Awesome. So thank you so much again for agreeing to share your story because it's a very powerful one, as the listeners will learn. And also, too, it's just, I think it provides so much inspiration for people who are struggling out there. And that's really, a very important thing. So why don't you go ahead and talk about your story? What was going on with your health? What sought you to seek holistic medicine?
So, just first start off by saying thank you so much for the opportunity to share on your platform. I really appreciate it. I never thought that I would get to this point, but here I am. And so I'm grateful just to be just to be in this space and time where I'm able to share. So April 2021, I found some hardness in my breast area. It wasn't specifically a lump, but I knew that there was something that was wrong, but I wasn't sure what exactly it was. So I reached out to my doctor, went through the normal procedure of having a biopsy. And when I received the results from the biopsy, they advised that I had stage 1 breast cancer. And from that point, of course, the initial shock of hearing the big C word really took me aback, but I wasn't immune or surprised by the C word cancer because my mother had passed away from breast cancer back in 2016. So I knew that it was just not coincidence, but I knew that this was something that I had to overcome strictly because my mother had endured this horrific disease prior to. So I said, well, since she succumbed to the disease, I wanted to do something different. I did not want to go through the process of chemo, radiation, losing all my hair. I didn't want to do any of that. And so when I sat with my oncologist and he looked at me like I had 10 heads when I told him that I didn't want to do that. And he said, well, you have a history, you have the gene that causes breast cancer. And I said, well, I said, I'm just going to take my chances. I can't, I don't want to do the normal traditional medicine. I don't want to do the normal traditional ways of doing things when it comes to curing breast cancer. So a friend of mine reached out to me and she said, hey, she said, there is a holistic doctor. Her name is Dr. Steele, and she has been in the medical field for years, and she has conquered or helped individuals conquer breast cancer. And I was like, okay, well, what do I have to lose? I might as well go ahead and um, give it a try. So when I met Dr. Steele, of course, I was gung ho about finding natural things to do to combat the disease, but I realized that Google wasn't my friend.
People
Because
get in trouble.
I'm telling you, I realized Google wasn't my friend, and I had already diagnosed myself. I already had a plan in place. First visit with Dr. Steele, I already had the preconceived notion that I'm already going to heal myself without her
Quickly.
help.
Quickly. Yes,
So,
exactly. Quickly, cheaply, to the point. You're going to be off.
so I can say,
Uh-huh. Go ahead.
yes, that I didn't need, I just wanted to be able to say, Dr. Steele, hey, I got it all together. This is what we need to do. This is my plan of action. And so, of course, me and my bright idea self,
Exactly.
I kind of, Dr. Steele and I bumped heads. We bumped heads, and I'm like, well, I don't want to do, and I was telling her, and she's got the 6 degrees. So I figured, hey, I can just tell her what I'm going to do. But
Exactly. And I'll agree with it, right? Of course. Sure. Do whatever. Do it all.
yeah. Well, it truly was a journey. I really succumbed myself to saying, or kind of humbled myself and said, okay, Lisa, you don't know everything. You don't, even though it is your life and you don't trust doctors, this is a new way. You said you wanted a new way of doing things. So you have to trust Dr. Steele, and you have to trust what she knows and what she has, has resolved as far as other patients that have gone through the same thing that you have. So, now I'm here. I am, as of March 2022, I am cancer free. And I'm grateful that I actually went through the process of not only the outside, external avenues of healing myself, but I also did some internal work as well. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the opportunity just to be an example or the poster child for holistic medicine.
Yes, yes. And thank you so much for sharing your journey. And I really appreciate your openness. So let's go back and discuss the allopathic approaches, because I think that is really important for people to understand. Number one, it's not us against them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an alternative doctor. I'm a complementary doctor. And so we do respect allopathic training, allopathic medicine, and we also want to make sure that we do our due diligence. So can you speak to that process in terms of ensuring that, because I think a lot of times people think that holistic medicine, we're against the medical system, if you will, when in fact me myself, because I'm an integratively trained healthcare professional, even though I'm not a medical doctor, I recognize the value of it. So can you talk a little bit about just that part of the process in holistic medicine in terms of going to, you went to your initial doctor and then we had follow-ups and all of that kind of stuff.
The good thing about the doctor that I initially saw is that he was willing to co-labor with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was very important because all of the necessarily testing and blood work and things of that nature, he was able to share that with you, and you were able to see and do a deep dive as far as the internal issues that I had, and not just surface. And I think that's one of the things that we, that you were able to achieve, is that you were able to see the root cause of what actually caused the breast cancer, not so much as having a quick fix, but you really wanted to see exactly what was going on internally that would have caused this root, this disease. And then you were able to allow me to share that with the other doctor, so that they would be able to see that there is not just that this is just a process, that this
Yeah.
is just not a quick
Mhm.
fix. And he was appreciative of the fact that I sought out other avenues to be able to find out, what is it that's actually really causing it, and what is it that we can do to try to get you to a whole place.
Yes.
And I think that was really important as well, because so many times we're in a microwave generation, and we want things done quick, fast, in a hurry, but we really don't want to dig deep and to decide, okay, how did I get here in the
Yeah.
beginning, in the first place? How did I get into this space? And then, once we figured out what the root cause of it was, then we were able to work out a plan and decide, okay, these are the necessary steps that we need to do to get to our end result, which would be to be healed and whole. So,
Exactly. Yes. And along the way, we look at diagnostics. So, in a breast cancer case, we're going to look at thermography because I want to see the inflammatory processes. We know that where there's inflammation, there could be potential for cancer. Now, thermography doesn't identify cancer like a mammogram would, but it definitely can show an indication of far early detection, because cancer in its most simplest form, not just replication of cells, but also toxicity in the belief of a naturopath. And so, we know that if there's toxicity in the body, we know there's going to be an inflammatory process, and that's going to show up in thermography. So we assess the thermography, and then we also look at other diagnostics, i.e., CT, MRI, and we do that as a baseline. And then we also continue to follow up to make sure that, where the treatments are working. And so we don't want to just guess, we want to test to be able to determine. So not only are we looking at the lab work, and we do credence to genetics, genetics and genetic predispositions we can't change, and genetics are less than 30% of disease process. So even if a patient has that gene, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to manifest it. So we look at that piece, we look at the biochemistry, we look at the liver, especially how the liver is clearing estrogen. That's very, very important. A lot of women, especially women of color, don't clear estrogen properly. And so then it becomes estrogen binding. And then that's why taking birth control sometimes is contraindicated, because we're already loading estrogen, and there's so many estrogen binding toxins in our environment already, and our poor livers just can't keep up with the production. So we look at it from a multifaceted approach, and there's always multiple causes. So there's obviously the physical, meaning nutritional, meaning biochemical deficiencies, toxicities, etc. But then there's also environmental. Now, in terms of your environment, you have a very loving home. I love your husband, who's so sweet. Your kids, your environment, you love what you do. So your work environment, you have a lot of hobbies and extracurricular things. So your environment was great. And some people, the environment's not so great, right? Your real struggles were more of the mental and the emotional side and the spiritual side, to really have faith, like really walk in this faith. Like you are a woman of faith, but this is
yeah,
very different. This is a very different level of faith. This is like, okay, yeah, that's good here, but this is like way too close to home. So
right,
if you could
absolutely.
talk a little bit about how your faith was challenged through the process, and then also too what mental and emotional things maybe came up along the way.
Um, I can say that, you know, one of the things that I love about this journey with you is that you could provide all of the necessary tools that I needed in order to be able to conquer what I was going through,
Mhm.
but it ultimately was in my lap to decide whether or not I was going to buy in
Yeah.
into the process.
Yeah.
Um, because you're not with me 24 hours a day.
Mhm.
But I only could take the tools that you provided for me to be able to really understand that, okay, you have everything in front of you. What are you going to do with it? What is it that you're going to process in your own mind that you can achieve this if you really understand that this is necessary for you to be healed and whole. You have to do away with the thought processes of you knowing everything. You have to get rid of the process of having control, because I think one of the things that that we as African Americans, we especially women, is that we want to be strong all the time.
Yes, exactly. Carrying people on
We
our
want to
back. Yeah.
Yes, we want to be strong all the time. We don't want to let people see us sweat. We don't want to be able to be vulnerable in our process. And I think that was one of the things that was hard for me, is that because I was the strong individual in this household, is that there's going to be some times where I'm going to be vulnerable and I'm going to be in a weak state. But if I have the necessary tools to decide, okay, this is what it is. It is what it is. Now you have to have the faith and be strong enough to know that you have to take care of you. You can't take care of everybody else and not take care of you. You have to be in the state where you have to have trust and believe in your creator and in your father, knowing that he said that he was going to heal you. You partner with him, you partner with your holistic doctor, and I'm going to do the work. I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you help yourself.
Yes, exactly.
So,
Exactly.
yeah, so it was hard, because when we want to be in control of everything and we want to make sure that we manipulate and try to create scenarios to make sure that we have achieved a specific state of mind, a state of being, it's hard, especially when the control is not in your hands. So
Yes,
it
exactly.
was a trust. It was a trust process. Basically, it was being able to trust God for real, and
Yeah.
not be in that space where, you can't say that you love him, but you don't trust him. So,
Yes,
so yeah.
100%. I think so many people, they have dilemma with that, right? They're like, yeah, I trust God, and I'll give it to God for a minute. I'm gonna let him hold on to it for a second, but then I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
take it back, right? And
Yep.
so they play this back and forth game where it's like, okay, I trust and have faith. Oh no, you're too busy. You've got a lot of stuff on your plate. I'm gonna just take that back right on back because I know better,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think
Right.
even from a provider perspective,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I remember early on, there was a lot of dilemma even within myself because, I'm a deeply spiritual person and I feel very responsible for my role as a teacher. So doctor in Latin means teacher, and that's what our role is. We are
Mm-hmm.
conduits. We are not the healer. We are a healer, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
God uses us, and He works
Mm-hmm.
through us. And so
Mm-hmm.
even from a provider perspective, having to put myself aside, right, and
Mm-hmm.
you really hold space for you as the patient and then be
Mm-hmm.
open to the guidance being received because it doesn't always make sense, and it doesn't
Right.
always make sense medically, and it doesn't always
Mm-hmm.
make sense on paper. And so there is a continuum of faith that happens that I don't think people realize, and especially because there's clinicians that are listening to this as well, that you know there's a lot going on, even on the provider side, when it comes to having faith, right? As a
Right.
naturopath, we believe that the body was made to heal itself, meaning that God made it divinely so that it will heal itself. Our job is to be a teacher, right? And to
Hmm.
show people, show his children how to heal in a step-by-step format. But ultimately, we as the provider, we are not responsible for the relationship that you have with God. And so we're just
Right.
giving you tools. And so the patient ultimately has to take personal responsibility and choose. I always tell people when they come in and they present with any kind of life-threatening condition, potentially life-threatening condition, they're going to heal no matter what, whether they
Right.
choose to heal on this side or whether they cross over and heal on the other side. That is actually nothing to do with me. That is between them and God, because a patient can do all the right things physically, but still have an absence of faith, still be holding on to anger, still be holding on to resentment. And that in and of itself can take them out of here. And so I
Yeah.
think we have to transform this very linear view of the human being, if you will, that they're just a whole bunch of collection of cells. And if all we do is, treat the cells, then it'll be fine. Those cells were formed based off of energy. Where does that energy come from? That energy is part of a collective consciousness known as God. And so
Mhm.
we can't exclude God from the treatment room, and then
Right.
expect miracles to happen. That's not that.
That's right.
That's where man becomes egoic, and man believes that man is the one that is driving the bus, and that, in my
Mhm.
opinion, is very dangerous to our medical system, our healthcare system, and to the patients. Ultimately, I think all providers, whether you're allopathic or naturopathic, have to have space for God in the exam room, because if you don't, you don't leave room for healing. You're just
Right.
pretty much believing that you are the ultimate truth. And what I have found, and I've worked on my ego quite a bit over the years, um, the more that I operate from that place of I know everything and I've got it all figured out, that's
Mhm.
where I make mistakes, right? That are right in front of me, because I'm too stubborn. I'm operating out of control. You referenced control, right? The healing that you have as a patient really has nothing to do with me. Again, I'm a conduit, I'm a teacher, I'm there to show you step by step. You referenced before how, you kind of came in and you already had your treatment plan. You just needed me to sign off on it. And, you were just a little confused as to why maybe I'd have, a couple addendums to your treatment plan. Um, can you talk about, being in that action, being that can do, take charge, powerful, got to get it done, you know,
Mhm.
can you speak to that part of yourself that showed up in
Yes.
my office?
Yes, I think I referenced being in control, and because I'm a alpha female, I like to be in control. I like to get things done. I like to administrate things, and I like to make sure things are in order. Well, that wasn't the case when it came to my health, because I think that the hardest part for me was relinquishing the fact that one, I didn't know everything. Two, that I had to loosen the grip and the reins of allowing someone else to be able to come into my space and tell me what to do. And
Mhm.
I think that that was the hard part for me, is because I wanted to be in control and I wanted to say, this is what we're doing and that's it. And I don't care what you
Yeah,
say.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And you should agree. I should agree with all that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And then, it took me coming to myself and saying, you don't know everything. In
Yeah.
order for you to get healed, you have to be able to listen. You have
Yeah.
to listen, you have to relinquish the reins, you need to take your hands off. And that's how it is with God. Like you said earlier, we want to be able to tell God what we want and when we want it and how we want it. And we're going to tell him what he's going to do to make it better.
Yes, exactly. We given directives.
Oh my,
Exactly.
yes, and we're
Like
gonna
we
give
know
him a
something.
directive. Yes. And so that was the hardest part for me, is that I had to get a resolve within myself and said, Lisa, you have to let go.
Yeah.
And letting go was hard for me. And so much so, as far as, with my journey, there were some things, some childhood things, some unforgiveness, some heartbrokenness that I had to let go in order for me to get healed. And that was a journey. I really, really, really had to dig deep and really had to relinquish those things that no longer served me.
Yeah.
And once I did that, then, it was some rough patches there. There were some times when I'm like, I don't know if I could do this, but
Yeah.
we can do all things through God. So just the decision of saying that I have to let go, and I was able to breathe and exhale. So I think that was a good thing.
Yeah. Exactly, 100%. And I think too, as matriarchs in our home, who take care of so many different people, it can be very challenging to, number one, relinquish that control, to, like you referenced, to be vulnerable, right? And to
Mhm.
allow someone in sight unseen, right? That,
Yeah,
who is this person? I don't know them, and if
yeah,
I've had anything in the past, right, about people betraying me or disappointing me or not
mhm,
following through, there's attachment wounds that have to be healed. And I deal with a
yeah,
lot of patients with trauma and various different, past experiences. And so I know that those attachment wounds exist, which is why I commit myself to a high efficacy and a high integrity. My words and my actions match. Now, I'm serving a higher power, God, right?
mhm,
When I'm
mhm.
working with patients. So I can't always be in agreement with patients' ego. And I think it's
Yeah.
difficult for patients to understand that at times because, and I'll tell people at the beginning, I'm like, while we're still friends, right? Want you
Yes.
to know, as we get down this road, you're
Mhm,
not always going to like me. Oh, no, Dr. Steele, it's going to be fine. I like you. You're good. I'm just going to let you know, right? Because
mhm.
you're really facing yourself. And I don't take it personally because you're fighting yourself. I just have
Yep.
to be there. And
Mhm.
I have to stand for your ultimate truth and your ultimate divine healing, because if I don't, and I agree with that ego, which is determined to keep you stuck and sick and all that, safe and all that, right? If I agree with that, you're never going to be able to get that transition. So there's always that kind of breaking point with everybody. Yours may have expressed more in a control, but I'll have others that it's like they need to understand. And then when I tell
Yeah.
them, you don't need to understand. And they're like, no, but I need to
Yeah.
understand. And I go, well, you know what? If you want me to teach you how to be a doctor, that's a different fee schedule. But for right now, right now, you're a patient.
Mhm.
And so I need you to be in the patient
Right.
market. And they have
Mhm.
some type of feelings about that, because that is part of their trauma response, is needing to understand and needing to figure it out. And you can't possibly understand it because you're the patient. How can you understand?
Right.
If you understood all things, you wouldn't be the patient. You'd be the provider. You'd
That's
be
right.
working, and I, even as the provider, I don't understand everything like miracles, and I learn
Mhm.
everything every single day. I have to approach every person not as a diagnosis, not as a disease process, not as their signs and their symptoms, but as a human being already healed. Because if I don't,
Mhm.
then I hold them in their current expression, their current manifested state, and that is not healing. I have to see
Right.
already divinely healed, and prioritize a process of how they're going to get step by step. So let's talk a little bit about process, right? So when you're
Mhm.
dealing with process, what are some of the things? Because I know people are like, yeah, I get the philosophies of it and I understand. And you never really understand until you go through the experience. So
Right.
disclaimer. However, talk about some of the practical things that you did, to change, and to get yourself into, the state that you're in now.
Practical things. A big thing for me was diet and making sure that I followed, because you talked about the testing, and we talked about You specifically provided the macros and the protein deficiencies that I had, and you provided the fat exposures that I had. So just basically honing in on making sure that I had a high protein diet, low carb, low fat diet, making sure that I just went through the process of making sure that I hit my protein markers every day in
Mhm.
order because as we talked about before, protein helps our body heal. And me specifically, because I'm a Black woman, my body, with the internal workings of my body, my liver wasn't clearing estrogen properly, so and it didn't process the carbs either well either. So just making sure that I had a high protein diet, exercise, of course, making sure that I did the internal workings as far as unforgiveness and all of those things, the spiritual things that I needed to do to process that out, and just trusting the process, just trusting the fact that this is just not a short journey. It's
Yeah.
it's it's actually going to take a minute for you to be able
Yeah.
to,
Mhm.
after years of abusing my body,
Mhm.
that now I have to actually dissect it and really walk this thing out and make sure that I follow the instruction necessary. Now, were there days that I didn't feel like doing it? Of course. Were
Yeah.
there days that I wanted to, just throw in the towels like, I'm tired of eating this. I'm tired of being
Mhm.
plain Jane, I'm tired of, but I know that there was also, emotional triggers that would cause me to be in a space where I didn't want to do it, but I had to talk to you and talk to God about why is it that my first response is to go to food when it comes to my emotional response. So there were a lot of things that I had to really dissect within my process to make sure that I understood myself because I really didn't understand myself. I
Yeah.
really didn't understand who I was as far as why I was abusing my body back then.
Mhm.
But now I'm able to see, okay. So when I get sad or upset or I want to eat like cookies and ice cream and all the other kind of craziness, but
Mhm.
it's still an ongoing process of it's not a one and done. You really have to dissect yourself. You have to unpeel yourself like an onion,
Yeah.
basically.
Exactly. I think people are largely unconscious when they're health with their health. They've experienced things, whether it's childhood or adolescence or whatnot, and their coping mechanisms have been to disassociate, not deal with life on life's terms, because things
Yeah.
were out of their control. So they feel powerless, helpless, hopeless. And then in order to soothe themselves, they'll go to foods and then develop unhealthy patterns around food, especially in those environments where it wasn't safe to express or communicate your emotions, which I mean, largely that's most of America as adults. Now, our generation is making a change with our children and we're teaching them a little bit better. But, I mean, you just shut it down. You don't talk about
Right.
it. It just doesn't exist. You shut it down, you survive, you power through, you make it happen, you just get it done no matter what. And so that has created a whole culture of people who lack emotional coping mechanisms, who lack really acknowledgement of their own emotions. They gaslight themselves, sadly. And so and they're overwhelmed by their emotions. Like bringing an emotion up is like, oh my gosh, it's so intense and so painful. And so it's easier sometimes for people to disassociate and check out. The problem is when you check out and you disassociate, right? Feelings buried alive never die, they transform. And in the practice of psychoneuroimmunology, the emotional manifestations of disease, right? It does inhibit not only your immune system, your nervous system, and your hormonal system, but then also you have unconscious lifestyle patterns that then also come as a response to that. So you're unconsciously eating, you're just eating whatever. You don't know how many grams of protein you're taking in. You don't know how many grams of carbohydrates you're taking in. You don't know how many grams of fat you're taking in. You just just take for granted and assume that what you're eating is healthy, right? And I'll ask patients like how your health is, and they'll go, fine, and that's because they really don't know the depth, right? Health is not the absence of symptom or disease. It is a state that we're building every single day, which means we must be conscious to what we're drinking, how much water we're drinking, how much protein we're taking in, how much fat we're taking in, how much carbohydrates we're taking in. How does our body feel? How does our energy levels feel? How's our muscular system feel? Right now, I'm personally, working on my musculoskeletal system because I've largely just kind of not beat it up. I've worked out for years. I did all kinds of crazy stuff and got into a whole bunch of accidents and things like that. And then I was more focused on my internal system than I was my, musculoskeletal system. So now, I'm working with a chiropractor and he's like, how do you feel? Are you okay? Because my body based off all my things is like jacked up. And I'm like, yeah, I'm used to dealing with it. Right. Meaning I'm used to disassociating with how it feels. Right. So that I can power through and survive. So even me as a provider, I do the same things. It's just I'm more present and conscious of it so that I'm able to then communicate and articulate that to the patient so that they're able to be more empowered and informed by that. So what would you say to somebody who's maybe thinking about holistic medicine? They're not sure about holistic medicine. Maybe they've clocked, a significant amount of YouTube hours or, TikTok, some TikTok for yous. And they're wondering how to put all this stuff together. What would you say to that person?
Uh, I would say trust your gut, trust yourself to try a different path. It wasn't easy for me to make that decision. But there is a particular scripture in the Bible that says that our people perish for lack of knowledge. And we we automatically assume and take for granted that regular medicine is the end all be all, but there's also other avenues that are helpful to us that we don't have to take, that we could take out the guesswork, meaning that we don't have to beat ourselves up or take someone else's word for face value because we don't want to take the time to do other research to help ourselves. And I would say that that was one of the most important decisions of my life is that I took my health back into my own hands and not pass it off to someone else to try to decide for me how I could get healthy. And in order for me to do that, I had to make a conscious choice that I want to explore other avenues. I want to do the research. I want to not Google per se, but I knew that there was someone else that could help me to help my health back into my hands. So if there's anyone that wants to do that and want to really have a better understanding of who they are holistically, then I would say that holistic medicine is the way to go because you want to make sure that you're here with the control of your health in your hands and being able to make conscious choices, conscious decisions about how you're going to live wholly and completely.
Yes.
So.
I like what you said in terms of about giving your power away, right? So often patients are in the exam room, right? So there's this old paradigm that doctor is God, right? I think doctors starting to fall from grace, thank God, because we're not gods, we're humans, right? And I think people forget that we're human, and we also forget that there's a certain training methodology that we went through. So when I decided to become a doctor, I looked at all the origins of all of those types of all the different types of doctors because I wanted to know what I was aligning myself with to see if it was in integrity with me and my soul and my spirit, right? And
Hmm.
so, and nothing against the medical community. I work with them all the time. I respect them greatly. But what I have seen over so many years is they treat every patient the same. It's a very linear approach.
Yeah.
They see the disease. They don't see the
Hmm.
human being that the disease is attached to. I've had
Hmm.
to call oncologists and say, "Can you please stop terrorizing our patient?" And they're like, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "When you say certain things in that exam room, right? Um,
Yeah.
that it's going to leave an impact, right? And they're
Yeah.
afraid, and I'm having difficulty getting them back to see you because they are very afraid of what that conversation is going to look like, right? And they're like,
Yeah.
well, they had, what was the term? It was something like they had a reasonable, fear response or something. Like it was a very logical approach to
Uh-huh.
communicating emotion, right? And it's like, and I understand, like when you're in that particular field, and you're working with patients all the time, that have terminal conditions, that have
Hmm.
terminal conditions, I can understand where it can be very challenging to connect with those patients. And so you have to kind of address people from one perspective, right? So I understand
Hmm.
both perspectives. What I also see a lot of is they move very quickly, right? Very, very fast.
Hmm.
It's like
Hmm.
boom, boom, boom. There's no time to think. There's no time to digest. There's no, like, the house is on fire. I call them firefighters. They are the firefighters of medicine, because they are like literally like, okay, we got to go. We got to do. We got to make happen. And so,
Right.
you know, that is can be very dangerous because you can miss things, right? And
Right.
then also too,
Hmm.
the patient has to mentally and emotionally digest what is happening to them. If
Hmm.
you have one
Hmm.
conversation, you go over the diagnostics, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, great, so now we're gonna schedule this, we're gonna schedule that, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. Like, that patient is like, holy cow, like, can
Right.
breathe for a minute, like, what is happening? And so I think compliance could go up if we humanized our healthcare a little bit. And I'll tell
Hmm.
patients when I have to send them back to the allopath, I go, look, it's not going to be a warm and fuzzy. You don't need a warm and fuzzy. I just need to make sure that we're monitoring this thing and make sure that we're doing good. Or if I have to send them for the surgeon, I go, look, most surgeons are very technical people. They're not going to be, they're not going to hold your hand. They're not going to tell you you're beautiful. They're
Right.
technical people. They spend lots of hours in labs. You actually want the guy who has the least people
Yep.
skills. That
Yep.
that is your best surgeon, right?
Yep.
And so I think there's a lot of nuance to the field, and I think everybody has their place in medicine. I think everybody has their place in healthcare, and everybody serves a role in treating the patients. And so I think it's really important that we get out of this very linear thinking, and we get out of this like, my way is the only way, because
Right.
the only people that suffer is the patients, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so, you know, I also respect allopathic medicine so well, and I'm not going to put the patient's life in danger. And so, if that patient, that wasn't your case naturally, but if that patient needs more aggressive procedure, I'm not going to hold on to this belief that, okay, there's nothing, there's nothing. I've actually helped people save their lives who otherwise would not get treatment because they don't trust that particular system.
Yeah.
And I've had to come in and say, okay, I get it. I understand. But there is nothing natural on this planet that is going to slow that angry tumor down. This thing is fast growing. It's hot. It does not, it is not going to even remotely look at any kind of herb supplement, nothing that I'm going to give it. It's going to laugh at it. So we do need to
Yeah.
get a surgeon in there. We may have to do some chemo. We may have to do some radiation, but it's how we do it. It's how we stage the body. It's how we maintain the health. Because remember, the allopathic doctors are only going to be focused on the disease. They're not going to be focused on the health of the patient. And so I have to monitor the health of the patient throughout that entire process to make sure that that patient has enough strength to be able to continue to do these treatments, because sometimes it's
Yeah.
very short-sighted. So what would you say when it to a provider, right, who may be interested in learning more about how they can integrate holistic medicine or holistic care into their practices, or just from the patient perspective, what wisdoms would you give to a provider to be able to make that transition?
I would say to a provider, be open to the patient's desires as far as healthcare as a whole. Um, because more oftentimes than not, they're scared. They don't really understand the whole process of the body and how they got to this point in the first place. So be open to being able to allow the patient to explore other avenues and not just automatically shut them down because they don't know what they're talking about, or because from a medical doctor to a patient, that they trust your guidance, but you also should be able to trust your patient too, because they would want to know specifically or be in a space where they would like more information or more education on how the body works and what they need as far as how they can get healed holistically. And break down the medical terms so that way they can understand it in layman's terms, because more oftentimes than not, when you go into a doctor's office, they give all these big words, but we have no clear understanding of what all of that those technical terms mean. So being able to break down in layman's terms what the body is actually doing, that would assist as well, because we need to know. I go back to what I said, our people perish for lack of knowledge. Some people are not going to do the research. Some people are just going to take, the medical providers' words at face value. So being able to having that relationship of that you're actually in a partnership together to get better. I think that would be a good advice for a practitioner that even was thinking about opening the door for holistic medicine. Just allow us to be in a partnership with you, so that way it's just not you feeding us information, but we're also being open to having other approaches that would be able to get us to the end result, and that's to be healthy.
Yes, I like what you said, especially because so many patients, they will do holistic things or they will do herbs or supplements, and they don't tell their providers, right? And so,
Hmm.
especially a lot of times people think, oh, okay, toxicity, so I must detox, right? And if they're on a traditional treatment, they can't detox because detoxing actually takes those things out. So, i.e., chemos, radiations, things like that. If they try patients try to detox while they're undergoing those, they can actually do more harm than good. So you want to have a
Hmm.
very open dialogue so that that patient feels safe to be able to communicate, hey, I was thinking about doing this, this, and this. What do you think about that? And then even from the provider perspective, being open to learning and being open to expressing and being open to saying, you know what, I don't know, but here I can refer you to somebody who does know. I get a lot
Right.
of patient referrals just based off of that and based off the results, because at the end of the day, we can have all different philosophies, but the labs, the diagnostics, all that stuff is king. So it's like
Right.
either you're doing it or you're not. You're either you got your results or your reasons. And so, I think that there is more room to allow for all different modalities. I don't think there's one that's better than the other. I think having a large tool bag is incredibly important, which is why I
Hmm.
have so much education, because I love having tools. And I just learned about the diversity and the complexity of the human. And so we're going to wrap up, but do you have
Okay.
any last things that you would like to express, share, communicate, etc.?
I would just say that I appreciate
Hold,
you
hold on one
as
second.
a,
I'm so
okay,
sorry. Hold on one second.
okay.
Hi, honey. Hi, honey. I'm gonna call you right back, okay? I know, I know. I want to hear your voice too. I love you too. Okay, I'll call you right back, baby. Okay, bye. I'm sorry, he'll keep calling if I do. Okay. Sorry, yeah, yeah. He'll keep going. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna call answer it the second time. So
Yes.
God, I'm
I would
sorry, you start
say
again.
that that's okay. I would say, give yourself a chance to believe that you can take power back over your health.
Mhm.
Um, don't beat yourself up. Don't allow your explore yourself. Because that was hard for me, is to explore, take myself back to my original state. Restoration is that's the exact definition is, going back to your original state of who you are and being able to um open up those old things that not necessarily feel good, but you're able to deal with it head on and not skip over it. Because I'm good for that. I'm good for it. I don't have time to deal with it. I don't want
Yeah.
to deal with it. I just want to, okay, this there. Okay, let's move on to the next. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
no, I can't. I realized I couldn't do that. So just dealing with who you are as a person, dealing with your emotions, dealing with just overall life and sitting in it and being present in it and being able to peel yourself back like an onion and really understand that you don't have the capacity to hold all that stuff in.
Yeah.
You don't have the capacity to try to control everything.
Yes.
Just let go and allow yourself to be healed in a space where you can um be the driver of your whole healing with partnership with God or your faith or whatever the case may be. But just have that mindset of knowing that, you can have a partner to walk with you to be in a healed space.
Yes.
So that's what I would say. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I also want to piggyback that partner can be anybody, right? That partner can
Hmm.
be, and I encourage many partners, not just one. And
Right.
so we all have our place, we all have our role. I'm sure your husband was very instrumental in as a support for you, your
Yeah.
family, your
Yeah.
friends, etc. People, I think it's really
Hmm.
important to have people that cheer you on through
Yeah.
that process. It really takes a village, especially when you're going through so many different experiences. I just want to absolutely thank you again for
Of
agreeing to do this interview. And shout out to I am Lisa Strong and LDA Collections International. So we will include those links if anybody is interested in your company. And if you wouldn't mind telling a little bit about what you have going on and anything that you have to offer.
Well, I just recently published my book back in October of 2022. Self-care is best, but soul care is self-care is good, but soul care is best, excuse me. And that's basically just it was birthed out from this process because so many times we take care of the outside exterior of ourselves, but we never dig deep as far as our soul. And it's really important for us to really have an understanding of our heart needs healing, our mind needs healing, our spirit needs healing, and that if we don't address those things that are internally that are broken, all the self-care gurus, all the self-care books, all the massages and the mani-pedis and all of that, that will not do any good for us if we are not taking care of our internal being. So my website, Dr. Steele has that available if you're interested in purchasing the book. And then my LDA collections is just just a barrage of things that I have that deals with the self image of yourself holistically. So yeah, I'm excited.
Awesome. I love it. I love entrepreneurship. I love sovereignty. I love just that whole evolutionary process. I tend to see that, once patients kind of go through that process, they're like fully expressed and living their joy and doing what they really want to do, not just what they have to do. So it's really
Yeah.
inspiring to see you jumping out there and doing more great things in the world. So
Thank
awesome.
you.
Well, thank you so much. I so appreciate you again. And make sure everyone tunes in for the next episode of Living Life Holistically with Dr. Erica Steele.